Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites! This is episode 148. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
So this is a pop culture episode.
Love some pop culture.
And we're going to try to take on the television sitcom this episode. What it means, why we like them, what are their roots, why some of them stick with us.
The highs and the lows.
The groundbreaking ones. So there's a lot of ground to cover here, guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we'll do it all justice. Listeners, this may be a supremely unfocused ADD style episode for us.
So a normal episode.
Yes, I mean, squirrel.
Hey, who doesn't love it?
So
who loves you, baby?
Yeah.
That's a cop show. We already did that one.
yeah, and we are going to pull some of these out for episodes dedicated to those shows later on. I know we have a MASH and a Seinfeld
Frasier.
and a Frasier coming, so there may be more of them that we pull down the road. But first, as we launch into this, I wanted to ask Robert here.
Yes.
Because he really brought up a good point during the tiny bit of show prep we did about the roots of the television sitcom.
Right. So, sitcom, situation comedy.
Yeah.
So, I like to look at things in not just local context, because sitcoms of every decade have had a different context societally, and that's reflected. But as far as where did this whole idea of a 20, 30 minute, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes an hour comedic show come from? And so start thinking about, there were the radio shows most recently prior to the TV. So you've got the radio, but where does even that come from? You go back even farther and you're talking plays. And once I got there, I realized, holy hell, this goes all the way back to Greek theater.
Yep.
I was thinking about my AP English class from high school and how funny I thought the play Frogs was. It was by Aeschylus, if I remember correctly. And although it might have been one of the other guys, but there was Aeschylus, there was Sophocles. Mm-hmm. There's just phenomenal amount of stuff that the Greeks wrote. We only have a fraction of it, but the comedies aren't always funny. It just usually means nobody died.
Right. The difference between the tragedy and the comedy had a happy ending.
Basically, yeah. Or at least, nobody died. I mean, so it wasn't tragic in that sense. But some of those were genuinely funny. And I was really surprised because I did not expect to enjoy that particular play, Frogs. And so I kind of opened my eyes and, hey, this kind of stuff can play beyond the time it was written.
Yeah, when you think that humor's 2,000 years old.
And we still get it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of interesting in and of itself, that something written, really, that was 2,500 years ago.
2,500 years ago.
That kind of thing can still be funny to a 17-year-old kid in high school.
There's a continuity to the human experience.
Very much so. Very much so.
I remember laughing out loud at Moliere.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Moliere is another great example. Yeah.
And that's stuff that's, 250 years old.
Yeah.
So.
And, so when you start thinking about situation comedy, it really is examining the human condition and making light of it.
Yeah.
The best of it is making light of it in a way that is not just, funny ha-ha, but funny,
Profundity.
Yeah.
Poking the hole in the hubris.
Yes.
So,
that's the best of it. And, the Greeks,
of it.
that's what they were best at.
Yes.
Because, hubris, that's just such a Greek tragedy kind of thing.
I think we've used that word 25 times in the last 4 episodes.
I know. Hubris has been a word of the day.
It's our favorite.
Well, we hadn't used it for a while.
We
haven't gone to pathos and ethos yet in a while.
Oh, I love pathos. Yeah, that's a good one, too. But, yeah, listeners, you may not know this, but Hallmark did not invent the romantic comedy.
No, they did not.
I mean, just dig up Taming of the Shrew.
Right, I was going to say, even Shakespeare didn't invent it. He perfected it, perhaps, but he didn't invent it.
Made it great. So I wanted to start there with that. That's the basis.
Well, it's universal.
Humans have been able to look at themselves and laugh at themselves for years. Centuries, 2 millennia. So what else would you fill this new medium of television up with?
Right.
But things that make people laugh.
And, the ability to laugh at ourselves is what sets us apart from animals in many ways. It's one of those major things, obviously. Sense of self different from others and all those things. But, you ever look at a dog. Dogs have joy and they find things humorous. Anybody that's had a dog and has observed, dogs can find humor in things. Now, they just don't express it the same way we do. But they can't laugh at themselves. They can have fun, but they can't laugh at themselves like humans do. And essentially, that's what a sitcom does, is it helps you find the humor in what you think is somebody else's situation, but more than likely, it still probably touches you, too.
Well, it's also deeper than the simple slapstick of some of the early live television shows that you would have, and that would be sketch comedy. This is not that at all. This is usually from familiar situations out in the world. This is human family relations or neighborly relations.
Two main categories of the sitcom is the family life versus the work life.
Right.
That's our
well, that's the situational comedy. Yeah. It's important that we differentiate that because between some of the others, like the variety shows would often show.
Right. Well, variety show sketch comedy, that's more akin to stand-up.
Very much so, yeah. Red Skelton was enormously popular for years.
Jack Benny.
Yeah, Jack Benny. And that's what they were. That was a very different... They were not situational.
Yeah. Well, and even, when you look at the non-sketch and even the non-situation, things like Groucho Marx, the Marx Brothers. And granted, they did not do television, but Abbott and Costello did television. Mm-hmm. Now, theirs was kind of a mix of situational sitcom versus sketch because often their shows were almost like one-offs every week.
Yeah, it's an outgrowth of vaudeville.
Right,
of stage comedy,
which, again, is an outgrowth of these earlier things, just gone in a slightly different direction. But, they all have similar roots. It's that ability to laugh at ourselves and find humor and even to find humor in things that are dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Generally, also, you have recurring characters in these shows.
Yes, and that's probably the most defining aspect of that type of comedy.
Yeah, but we love characters. Characters
the appeal of a character.
That's what we bond to, and television producers very quickly realized, we will tune in to watch Andy Griffith because we love Andy, and we love Opie, and we love Floyd, and all
Lucy.
the rest of them. And Lucy. But Lucy, I'm glad you mentioned Lucy because essentially it's her and Jackie Gleason that start this. To make these things phenomenal. Those two early television pioneers.
You talk about that's why people tune in. That's really why people tuned into even sketch shows and things like Abbott and Costello with a different story, for lack of a term, and characters, because they weren't tuning in to see what characters Bud and Lou were playing. They were tuning in to see Bud and Lou.
That's right. Yeah,
exactly.
And it's very difficult sometimes to differentiate, and you don't always do that, the stars from the roles.
Right. Bud and Lou were the same, and were.
And then Three Stooges, same thing.
Yeah, same characters in every short or every film. So you weren't looking for them to play a character, you were looking for them to play themselves.
Yeah, what shenanigans are they going to get? Are they going to get into?
And in a lot of these great sitcoms, that line is blurred as well.
Very much.
Lucy
so.
did it. Jackie Gleason does it. I mean, you can't tell where Ralph Cramden ends and Jackie Gleason begins.
And he made a career out of that.
Yes.
I mean, I ran into him on Pluto TV on the Johnny Carson thing.
Yeah,
which we love our Pluto TV, and the Carson reruns are hilarious. And they brought in Jackie Gleason. This is in the 80s, and he's still. They ask him, "Do how sweet it is," and he does. And this is 20 years later, almost 30 years later. That became so iconic.
Yeah,
and that was when it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons when the Honeymooners was that good. Lucy, we can.
To me, Lucy is the epitome of comedy. Lucille Ball was Michelangelo, G.K. Chesterton, genius level.
Yes, she was.
Comedy.
As comedian, she was so much so that she would reinvent a new show periodically. You know, she had 4 shows.
Yes.
3 of them were fairly successful. The 4th one...
Well, the 4th one kind of... the ship had sailed, and it was...
Yeah. Well, it was in the 70s. That's the one she had with her kids.
It was later than that, I think. It was...
Yeah, there was one, I think, all the way into the 80s.
Really? Yeah.
Okay.
The 3 that she did... Of course, I Love Lucy, The Lucy Show, and then Here's Lucy.
Yes.
Here's Lucy was the early 70s. That was pretty successful.
Yeah, that one was
and that was also with Gail Gordon.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in the ones beyond the... right after the...
he was in The Lucy Show with Vivian Vance.
Yes.
Whereas Here's Lucy is just Gail Gordon and Lucy. And God, you can still see these things out there periodically. This is hilarious. It's tremendous. It's got those vaudeville roots in it. It's got that physical comedy that she does so well.
She was the bomb at physical comedy. John Ritter once was talking about his greatest influence in his comedy, and it was Lucille Ball. And as soon as he said it, I realized, oh my God, he is the male Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
When you look at him in Three's Company, he is the male Lucille Ball.
The body movements and the expressions are all, very much. So that's, I mean, that was the 2 I wanted to start with for sure that we had to recognize. I Love Lucy, incredibly groundbreaking.
You got a Cuban husband.
Yes, yeah.
You just don't do that.
Yeah, so someone that's considered basically a foreigner at the center of the show, plus the lead being female. That was hugely
right. It wasn't I Love Ricky. It was I Love Lucy.
Yeah, it was hugely groundbreaking compared to
Desi Arnaz
Ozzie and Harriet
comes on and sings.
Yeah,
I mean, often. I mean, they give him a number that he's doing in these things.
Well, it's
if you watch
their
this.
show. It's Desi Lou Productions. I mean, that's the other thing that's really amazing about Lucille Ball. You know, we have Lucille Ball to thank for Star Trek.
Absolutely. It's production.
That's their production company.
Yeah.
And then the Honeymooners, again, incredibly groundbreaking. Only 39 episodes, but they were a look at working class... blue collar folks, like you said, a cold water walk up flat in New York. It was just different from the aspirational tone of other 50s programs.
Right. Even when you look at the radio shows, or even movies that were comedies, you know, it always had that. Even in the middle of the Depression, it was either about people who were well off, or people who were doing a lot better than the average guy.
Yeah,
they at least looked that way.
It was always an attempt to move up that middle class appeal. I mean, those were your viewers to a large degree. These were people who could afford a television.
Yeah, Cary Grant's wearing suits. Just about whatever he does.
People wore suits all the time back then. I mean, people wore suits to ball games.
Yeah,
you're shooting your hat to go outside. So to have a guy front and center that's wearing the bus driver's uniform. And struggling to get by every week. It was huge. It was groundbreaking.
Yeah, and because it was real. That was more the experience of a good number of people than anyone liked to admit.
And let's not take away the fact that Art Carney and Jackie Gleason are comedic geniuses as
well.
They're
a whale of a team.
That's correct. And they just had it, and that's one of the reasons that those shows are still shown today. People can, you don't see much Ozzie and Harriet or Father Knows Best. You can find them, but they're not everywhere.
Or and not to say that those weren't great and funny
shows.
Absolutely,
exactly.
Because I used to watch Ozzie and Harriet, and I used to watch The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
Well, yeah, I'd forgotten about that one.
Some of those teen-oriented family comedies. Leave It to Beaver. My Three Sons.
Yeah, Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons found excellent life again in syndication.
Yes.
And that
that's what we are going to know. We may be old, but we ain't that old.
Right, yeah, we don't remember them when they were on.
But the Honeymooners stands out against all of that background.
Yes.
As really, this is the top level of what a 50s comedy could be.
And it was, interestingly enough, though, it's about the only one that had that particular slice of life looked at.
Yeah, most were very suburban. Leave It to Beaver, the epitome of suburbia.
Yeah.
Even Dennis the Menace is
he's a rambunctious little kid, but everybody understands that he's not an evil child.
No.
Contrary to what Mr. Wilson thinks.
So, I think we talk about also about how these shows reflect our mindset or influence our mindset. Even this trend goes through even through the early 60s. Again, important shows that highlighted incredible talent, like the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Or
Dick
the
Van
Andy
Dyke.
Griffith Show. Even Gilligan's Island. Iconic shows that took on a life in syndication, but weren't really super groundbreaking.
No, they're everybody knows them, but
They weren't groundbreaking in the sense that... Well, define groundbreaking. I mean, Dick Van Dyke is... I mean, he's right up there with Lucille Ball as far as comedic genius.
A physical comedy, but
also that whole
with,
tripping over the ottoman thing.
Yes,
I mean that's iconic in and of itself.
But it's the important part. Other than the Honeymooners, there's very few social statements.
Yes,
a lot of these
that
early
is true.
shows.
Yes.
well, if
That's
through the 60s,
Yes.
you're right,
And
and that doesn't
even Hogan's Heroes, a very popular show, is like, you're making fun of the war. Well, what?
Yeah.
Even that's not completely subversive.
No, every once in a while they dip into something serious. They have that brief moment occasionally in there, but that was rare. As a general rule, comedies are supposed to take you out of things and poke fun of things, and we've talked about this before. Vietnam changes that.
Yeah,
that's really the linchpin.
Yeah,
and it gets to the point where when you've got these popular comedies in the late 60s, much of which are rurally focused, which is, Filmways Productions made a huge bunch of them. They were cheap, they were easy, and people watched them in gazillion numbers. I mean, they always had huge numbers. And as you said, Martin, so well, when you're seeing body bags come home on the news at night, television seems to be totally tone deaf to this. Gomer Pyle is the obvious example.
Yes, Gomer Pyle, a show about a Marine where Vietnam is never mentioned.
That's right, and I think in many respects that's when the television producers decide this is not what our people want.
Well, this is a case where I think you could probably make the argument that prior to the mid 60s, when the 60s become dark, the latter half of the 60s. Really from November of '63 onward.
Yeah, that's
a very dark
that
decade.
Is exactly it. Yes,
very dark.
That changed everything. Camelot
we don't
is over.
Think about it that much about it that way because people are, especially boomers, are so damn nostalgic.
As we talked about, again, the Pollyanna quality of our entertainment kept on going right on past that.
Right.
Yeah,
but,
it took
the
1970
50s are very
for
much an
change.
idyllic reflection of how we wanted society to be, and in many cases, society was
not how it was, but how we wished it could be.
Well, I think in many
we
ways
all
it
wanted
was.
to live in Mayberry.
Well, yeah, or have that perfect family like Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best. But I think a lot of the '50s was reflective of life at the time. Now, obviously, not 100%. Nothing is ever 100% reflective. I'm not saying that, but when you get to the '60s and it becomes that dark decade, at some point. Because nobody changes anything that is working. Okay, so it has got to get to a certain point and then break before they're going to cancel all those rural, simplistic comedic shows.
But they were still working. They were extremely popular.
Right.
So it was,
but at some point,
it was subversive.
People are going to say,
and that's
this is fun, but.
This is we got to do.
This is weird,
That's
maybe
exactly
doesn't work
it
for us anymore.
And it's kind of what we talked about. You have to break apart something. You have to break something in order to release the energy of chaos to transform things.
Right. Well, I mean, it's true. Art imitates life, and life does imitate art. And I can make the argument going both ways at any time about so many different things. Yeah. But in many ways, I think sitcoms, up to a certain point. I think until we get really into the meat of the 70s, is art imitating life. And once we realize that, like Martin says, a show about a Marine that never mentions Vietnam, we realize that art's not imitating life anymore.
That's right.
That rural thing with Petticoat Junction and Green Acres, it doesn't reflect the reality of the Chicago Democratic Convention riots and things like that.
That's right.
I mean, it's so hard to take and juxtaposed Green Acres against, like what you're saying, the 68 convention riot. Green Acres is like, that goes back to the 40s with Ma Pa Kettle movies.
Right.
It's like, how does this doesn't make any sense anymore.
Well, it was well made. It was well written. It was funny.
Oh,
but,
yeah, it's
but
still
it was,
funny.
Absolutely, you can watch it. It's still great.
Yeah.
Wilbur the Pig is still hilarious.
That's right.
Arnold the Pig.
Arnold the Pig.
Arnold Zippo.
Arnold. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that stuff is still
It'd be
funny.
one charming pig. So let me pop in a couple more that this is one I'd forgotten about, but kind of rediscovered thanks to Pluto TV. That Girl,
Yes.
starring Marlo Thomas.
Now, what years we're talking?
This is getting into the late 60s.
That's right.
So we're still talking 60s.
This is slightly transformational, though. This is a
Right, because
slight turn.
This is
You haven't gone Maude yet.
yeah.
But
This is the
a
first
precursor to
one
that.
where a single woman's the lead. Now she has a long-term boyfriend.
Yeah.
But it's baby step because again you move from there to the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yeah.
Where pretty much the entire run is there's nothing about her trying to date somebody.
Right.
She lives on her own with her life having value outside of a man.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing was, they were going to make her a divorcee, but they didn't want Mary Tyler Moore to have divorced Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
And because
yeah.
that's the thing that people would
have thought.
Yeah. And that they couldn't bring themselves to do. But also, it fits better because if you make her a divorcee, you're defining part of her character in relation to her former relationship with her husband.
Which failed.
Which was a failure.
Yeah.
So, by doing it this way, where she's just a single woman, that worked out so much better.
And on top of all that, again, a super quality show, funny.
Oh, yeah.
She was tremendous.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And
that
a lot
brought
of
us Rhoda.
Yeah,
and
Rhoda
Phyllis.
and Phyllis.
Phyllis,
and these ancillary characters were tremendous as well. But it's super, super important, super groundbreaking in that, again, she's a character of her own without her relationship.
And that's the
with
shift.
A man.
That is the
cool.
total shift
Yeah.
from the 60s to 70s. We haven't had a gear change like that in sitcoms at all.
So that one to me that's just a demarcation line right
That's
there.
exactly it.
And again, That Girl with Marlo Thomas.
It's the first crack in the eye.
Yeah,
Damn.
and so it's that first step towards that. And again, she's involved in production. Betty White, Lucille Ball. They're involved in the production of these shows and guiding what's on the screen for us. It's
that's
amazing.
a really good point. Especially Lucille Ball, but there are a lot of women who are behind the scenes getting stuff done that you just don't really realize at the time. I mean, with Lucille Ball, it's a little bit easier to recognize because, my God, her name's all over it. Desilu. That's Desi and Lucille.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of that, and arguably some of the best of these sitcoms of the era are female led.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
Again,
Maude is still the quintessential example of. By this time, the change has completely happened.
Honestly, I find Maude less funny than the others.
It is because it's really edgy and in your face. It's heavy feminist at this point. This is women's liberation on steroids.
It's angry.
That's it.
and Mary was never angry.
Right.
That's correct.
They're
different approaches to different things, but they both had. They were both successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Maude. So this is a good time to move into the 70s. And really the show that starts it all in the 70s.
Yeah.
Again, that really tumps over the whole apple cart.
Yep.
Is All in the Family.
All in the Family, that's right.
The
genius of Carol
really
O'Connor,
bringing in
Gene Stapleton.
the social ennui of the moment.
Yeah. In your
Gloria
face,
and
too.
Meathead and everything about the early 70s is
Vietnam
right there in the show.
Is regularly discussed.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything about the protests, everything about
Nixon
the
and
social
all that's
yes.
going on. They
And
don't
it's
shy
just-
away from that.
That's unheard of. I mean,
What?
You never talked about Eisenhower and Leave It to Beaver.
Well, toilets flush upstairs. That would have. What the hell has just happened?
The Brady Bunch home didn't even have a toilet in the bathroom. I don't know if you guys realize this.
Oh no!
But in the show, so the kids' bathroom that they shared.
Yeah.
What do they call? I forget what they call the shared bathroom. There's a term for that. But you see the sinks, you see the shower, but there is no toilet in that room.
Well,
now, I never thought about that.
Lucy and Ricky never slept in the same bed.
Right, they had twin beds.
Twin beds.
So did Rob and Laura.
Yeah, so did Rob and Laura.
But
it's like,
when you think
wait a minute,
about
where'd the kids come from?
Exactly. I don't know, but let me tell you, that had to be some crazy stuff because you didn't have room to do much.
You're doing work in a twin bed.
That's right. I mean, it's like being in college. But anyways, that whole thing about the bathroom, that's how the sensibilities are just so odd. I never realized that until one of those HGTV shows. They found the home that was the outside model.
Yes.
And they remodeled the inside to match the set.
To look like the show, with the floating staircase and the whole bit.
Yeah, the whole bit. Now, they had to finagle some things. They had to build on like a huge amount in the back, but they did it. They turned the damn thing into the house. And it's just amazing what they managed to do with it.
Yeah.
But they made that point. Here's the bathroom. Mm-hmm. We actually have a toilet now.
And that was still a very 60s TV series.
Actually,
in style.
It bridges.
It bridges, yeah, because it ends in the 70s.
It's also...
Its approach is very late 60s.
Yeah, it's a very unique show in the probably the first one with the blended family.
Yes,
We'd always had the nuclear family in the sitcom before.
So this is groundbreaking in that.
Yeah,
because you've got two people. The presumption is both their spouses have died because there's never any mention
no mention of the
divorce.
Yeah.
Which in itself, you don't do that.
Right.
There's no death.
Right.
And there still isn't because they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But they bring them all together into this blended family.
Yeah.
And from there you move forward to like the Partridge Family, which was a very similar template, turned slightly aside and added into the music scene, which capitalized...
Which would have been, trying to grab on that same dynamic as the Monkees and something like that.
All of that stuff,
Pop
you're
culture.
putting those things... Because in the late 60s and early 70s, music is huge.
Yes.
And so you're gonna take that... Of course, you've got the teen heartthrobs of Davy Jones and David Cassidy. And all the teenage girls, that's a huge market.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
the Bradys, they started their own musical group.
That's right.
And of course, Davy Jones was on an episode of...
Oh, I've forgotten that.
Brady
That's
Bunch.
right. Because Marcia wanted to be...
Oh, yeah.
That's right. I forgot.
Yeah.
That's right.
And, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, again, All in the Family, the first one that's really socially aware.
Yeah, we don't
in this moment. And then its spin-offs start to become important. We've already talked about Maude.
Yep.
And talking about Maude, that show, she's married for the fourth time.
Yeah, which would have been scandalous 10 years
right,
ago.
And she has an abortion.
Yes.
I had forgotten that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that was incredibly bold on their part in the sense that this would have been done not long after Roe v. Wade.
It aired, I think, a month before the decision.
Oh, was it before?
Before the court decision came out.
After,
it was very contemporaneous to the court decision.
Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that this is beyond third rail kind of stuff.
Yeah, and Maude was known for that. It was not afraid. It was kind of like
alcoholism was dealt with on Maude.
That's correct, and infidelity and others, all sorts of these sort of things like that, which they've taken. Once All in the Family was set in concrete and realized we've got a hit here. Let's see how far we can push this envelope.
Yeah.
So you take it in two different directions. You have Maude, which is this proto-feminist, angry, in-your-face push that's going on at the culture, and you take a black family and bring the Jeffersons, and bring them into prominence, and you portray them as this upwardly mobile, extremely business successful family. They
lived the American dream.
That was the whole point of the show. Moving on up, they were leaving Queens to move to Manhattan.
And beyond, it was so groundbreaking that even today you can say moving on up to a deluxe apartment in the sky, and everybody knows what you're talking about.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows what that means.
And it introduced a multiracial couple.
That's right.
On television, the neighbors.
Yeah.
So I wanted that was the next place I wanted to get was to the Jeffersons because it's amazing, and everybody still remembers Sherman Hemsley and, and all that. But that was a terrific show.
Let's not leave All in the Family just yet.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I think that's an important one to spend a little bit of extra time on. I mean, first of all, Norman Lear was a genius at creating shows.
Yes,
he really was. As evidenced by all the spin-offs, the successful spin-offs that came off of All in the Family. But that dynamic on All in the Family was astounding because it's not just that you're dealing with these social issues. It's how he dealt with them because you've got what is essentially supposed to be, by the way that the thing is structured, the protagonist is the bad guy.
He's unlikable in many ways.
In many ways. In a lot of ways, he's very likable.
And then turns out to be the one you really cared about.
And Carol Connor. They
because,
pull that off.
Let's face it. Meathead and Gloria, Mike and Gloria.
Yeah.
They're annoying.
Yeah.
Even though they're on the quote-unquote right side of the issue.
Not always, but most of the time, especially Mike Stivic. He is, and that's the tension they drilled in.
Right, and of course then he ends up running off.
I hated that because I thought the magic was when all four of those actors were in the same room together.
Yeah.
But when they brought Joey in, the grandson, that I thought was when Archie Bunker's character really shone. Because he loved that boy.
Yeah.
And also now when he owned the bar.
Archie Bunker's Place.
Archie Bunker's Place. That was interesting because they had the little girl that was part of that.
Yeah. And it was
he was a great character because he was complex.
Yeah.
And even though he was not overtly racist in the sense that he hated everybody who was not white. Mm-hmm. They just made him really uncomfortable. Now, by today's standards, yes, he's a raging racist. He hated everything. No, he didn't.
Everything was just alien to his experience.
Right.
And he didn't know how to take it.
And he was ignorant in many ways.
Yeah.
And but he learns.
Like, one of the funniest things is when he has that transfusion from a black female doctor. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
But it showed him. In many ways, sometimes they showed him the error of his own ways. Sometimes, they didn't. Probably more often than not, they didn't, especially early on. But it's just interesting that the protagonist was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Quite often. Yeah. That's an interesting twist in how stories were done.
Yeah.
And it was brilliantly done.
And it was brilliantly done. So anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No, it's awesome. I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you brought that in because I'm moving really fast.
Well, we need to because
I want to get to a couple more that we'll mention briefly. Again, the importance, the follow-on on the Jeffersons. Good Times.
Yeah, that's what I forgot. That is also a spin-off of this.
So that's...
Spin-off from Maude, specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Florida was her maid.
So it's a spin-off of a spin-off.
Yes. So it's taking characters and expanding on them. So it's a working-class black family.
Yeah.
The Honeymooners moved into 1971.
Only with kids.
Yeah,
with kids.
So you work in the kids. And then Sanford and Son. Not a spinoff, but...
Based on a British comedy, actually.
But, and taking Red Fox, who... If you'd ever listen...
Dirtiest man alive.
Yes, if you'd ever listen to a Red Fox album, you're like, he was on network TV?
Yeah.
Because, if you think comedians today are dirty...
Yeah.
Go back to 1970s Red Fox.
That's right. He was doing it long before
this is why he was the idol of people like Richard Pryor.
Well, him and Carlin were doing it before anybody else, and were very popular.
And so, to transform Red Fox into a TV star was tremendous for
Sanford and Son was one of my all-time favorites.
Yes,
it was. You never missed it. You always watched Sanford and Son.
And maybe it's just because of the generation that the three of us are. Because obviously, we joke about it, but boomers, millennials. There's a generation between both of you that can't stand either one of you. Mm-hmm. But we talk about how ours is so unique in that we've dealt personally with all of the changes that have happened, both on the racial side. By the time we come around and are cognizant of the world around us and beyond us, race is not an issue. We do not grow up with that, even though we grew up seeing it reflected in ways in family. In
those older than us.
And of course, we still see it on television with Archie Bunker, but that's not in our wheelhouse of experience. So, seeing things like Good Times and Sanford and Son and Chico and the Man.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up Chico and the Man.
These are
which
all
followed
things.
Sanford and Son. They were the same hour block.
Freddie Prinze was he was lost way too soon. He was fantastic. And the guy who played Chico, the old man, what was his name?
Jack Albertson.
Jack Albertson.
Jack Albertson played the
old man.
Yeah.
But for us, this was nothing to see these
races getting along
non-white
together.
families and people in these sitcoms. I never thought twice about why aren't they white?
No.
Whereas nowadays people think, well, why aren't they white? Why aren't they this? Why aren't they that? It's like, I don't care. It's just funny.
Yeah. Because they were all well written, well produced, with great talent.
Yeah.
On both in front of the camera and behind the camera.
Yeah, that's certainly the key.
Funny, even when they were dealing with serious issues.
And often they did.
Yeah.
They would sometimes break the mold. I mean, MASH, which we'll get to in a minute, came up around this sort of time, and it's actually
came up with All in the Family.
That's right. It was that new
73 is the first season of MASH.
It is because the movie's 71.
72 to 83. It's an 11-year show.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's literally they do the movie and then they rebrand it over for that, and it's designed as a comedy originally, but it doesn't stay there.
Yeah. I mean,
yet it doesn't leave there either.
Yeah.
It's what we would now call a dramedy.
That's exactly. It was one of the first, really.
MASH becomes this kind of preachy, almost jump the shark, Alan Alda's pulpit kind of show.
Yeah, when he got real preachy and socially conscious, it really, there were
sometimes
times when
it worked, and sometimes it did not.
When he got preachy, is when I think it just didn't work.
Yeah, those are the later seasons.
But early on, I mean, especially those first 4 seasons, probably. I mean,
they're the most funny.
Yeah, I mean, MASH is something you remembered. Like, everybody who watched it remembered Radar walking in to the operating theater and just deadpanning Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. It spun in. There were no survivors.
Everybody remembers that.
It's like,
and
that's word for word.
And we didn't see it live. We might have.
Yeah, we would have.
We would have. Maybe not.
I probably saw that live.
Possibly, but that was only one time. It's syndication. We would never have remembered it had we only seen it once.
It's been syndicated enough. But
well, at our particular age, that's probably true because we would have been 10-ish, 11-ish.
That's right. We saw it. We didn't. We were affected by it, but we couldn't memorize it until syndication came on.
But when you see it now, you're like, oh,
it's an iconic television moment.
I get why this has that reputation as that moment. It's immense because nobody says a word after that, and they just put the camera on the rest of the characters, and they're just there.
Yeah,
and it's a comedy, and it's been hilarious up to that moment, and now it's heartbreaking.
Right. Well, and I understand why that show did not stay a comedy because seriously, 11 years on a 3-year war.
That really wasn't about that war.
Right.
It was a Korean War TV show that was really about Vietnam.
It started out that way, but by the time it ends, that's kind of you're moving away from that, and that's why they decided to, the war piece. That's one of the reasons that they decided to end it. Is just we've moved on.
Well, 11 years is a long time for any show.
That's correct.
It's a lot of ground to cover for a sitcom.
It was in syndication while it was still being aired.
Yes, it was.
And
that's unusual, too.
Yeah,
11 years is 11, 12 seasons is max sitcom. That's Big Bang.
They got
Cheers, that level.
Yeah.
Gets to 12 seasons. A lot of them do not, and they stay memorable even if they only make 5 seasons.
A lot of them, they may get like the last few of MASH. There's probably not nearly as many memorable episodes those last few years. You could probably make the same argument for a lot of shows. Cheers, especially. Frasier, I think, was probably funny from beginning to end.
Yeah.
The last year, my wife and I recently rewatched them in order, and the 11th season is definitely different in tone. It's like we know we're wrapping this up, and a lot of the stuff. Some of it is brilliant, but it did not have the bite that the.
There's some. We got to do some payoff here.
And that's correct. So you have to end certain things.
Like Big Bang. I think that was funny to the last.
Yeah, they didn't change the formula much.
No.
It evolved.
Which is surprising considering that you had you started out with 4 guys who couldn't get a date to save their lives. And, 3 guys who couldn't get a date to save their lives, and 1 guy didn't even care because Sheldon was totally asexual at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the funniest moments in that was the first night that Sheldon and Amy spent together. And Sheldon says, "Boy, if I'd known it was like this, I would have done this a lot sooner." And of course, Amy's got the hair that's all,
right. And of course, the look that she gives him, Well, I'll see you next year, Amy.
Oh yeah, that was yeah. But
so we'll hit Big Bang more later, but
I mean, it's one of those few shows that made fundamental changes to the relationships between the characters and still worked.
It still worked. That's right. Because oftentimes that's the kiss of death.
Right. Yeah. So that's what makes that one particularly special. Yeah, we are like 20 years too early on that.
Yeah, because there's still a couple more 70s ones, and then there's still a couple of 80s ones to talk about, and then a little bit in the 90s. So I'm still trying to do chronological order here.
Well, it's important.
Well, you know what? Since we are out of order, let's do a bourbon break.
No, I was going to say, that's fine. Yes, that's right.
You're out of order. I'm out of order. This whole episode's out of order.
Nice.
I'm out of order with Michter's, actually.
Yes, I think it's unanimous again here at Studio M. We are at the 30th floor of Nakatomi Building, behind the waterfall, down the hall from Ellis, and we are sipping on the wonderful Michter's again.
Truly, this is why I do need to go get a bottle. Yeah, I was commenting when you poured my first glass earlier that I really liked the bottle because it's evocative of a classic, saloon kind of look.
Yeah,
and I like that. I like
that quite a bit. Pull the cork and
walk into the swinging doors, belly up to the bar, and say, "Barkeep, pour me a whiskey.
Pour me a Michter's. Pour me a Michter's."
That's right.
So thanks again, Michter's. We appreciate you here at Snakes and Otters.
That's right. And like I said, this is really jumped up to the top level of my favorites.
It's just so that smoothness is just incredible.
Yeah.
So it's got to be the aging.
There are some bourbons that I like because it's not quite so smooth. Every once in a while, I get in the mood for a Devil's Cut.
Yeah.
But when you find one that's this smooth, it's like this, you can go to anytime, no matter what.
So, if you will indulge me, also a quick shout out of appreciation to Mrs. Martin, who helped with a little homemade lunch, some Korean style pork chops and rice. I helped her mix up the marinade this morning, and I think they came out pretty darn good.
I was very pleased.
Yes, very good.
A little honey,
fantastic.
A little garlic, a little fresh grated ginger.
Yeah, the ginger was very good. You could taste that. I like that. Used to be you could go to not Thai. What were the places that did the cooking on the round?
Mongolian.
Mongolian, yes.
Yeah, the Mongolian grill places, yes.
Those places were really good. But
don't say that.
There was one that was over off Hurstbourne in Taylorsville.
Oh yeah.
That you got to put your own mix together.
BD Mongos.
No. That place was garbage compared to the other one.
Oh, two lines.
Yeah, it was a little hole-in-the-wall place over by BW3.
Yeah, I know exactly where it was at.
Yes. My former pastor took us there. We used to go there all the time. The place was always empty. I was surprised it stayed open as long as it did. But oh my gosh, that place was good because you got to mix more of everything than you did with the other place.
I loved it. You got to watch them make it.
Yeah.
And
it was exactly the way you ordered it.
Yeah.
Because you literally handed them the ingredients.
Yep.
In the amounts that you wanted.
There you go.
Yeah.
Love it.
So that was great to get the steak and plenty of rice, and I always love the carrots and the water chestnuts and all that stuff.
You're making me hungry too. We need to skip a little bit.
All right, man, I'm stuffed. How can you be hungry?
It was good though. It was
but before we go on, since we are doing sitcoms and we are at a break, we should raise a glass to the late great Bob Saget.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Full House, which
and Fuller House,
a long-lived show. I mean, not necessarily groundbreaking, but
successful.
It's successful.
It had some groundbreaking elements if only in the kind of characters they put together.
Yeah.
It was one of those one of those really first extended family kind of situations.
I mean, it sort of became a trope that sitcoms at that stage were always about the single dads.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, that's not really normal. But Full House and Blossom and a lot of these other ones, it was always about the dads because they wanted a guy to lead the show.
Right.
So,
but also single dad. Nowadays the single dad's a character of scorn, and ridicule because that's what dads are on sitcoms.
Yeah.
So I raise my glass to him for playing a good dad.
Well, he did very much so, and he had comedic chops. He was a talented guy. Gone way
another guy with the dirtiest mouth ever. Oh my gosh, his stand-up comedy, incredibly dirty. Yes, I didn't realize you didn't know that. But yeah, he's known for being.
He could really move back and forth kind of between the worlds.
Yes,
he could sell you as the innocent, nice guy dad, but then the comedy could
get really,
that's kind of
not
why
quite vile, but
it was a big deal to like roast him. Those roast shows.
Yeah,
he would be mentioned quite a bit, and I think he had his own roast. So
yeah. But yes, to the
Bob
late
Saget.
great Bob
Bob
Saget,
Saget.
he is definitely a missed light in the comedic
gone
world.
too early. Yes.
All right. So a couple more from the 70s that I want to hit. Again, unusual, successful, but one day at a time.
Yeah.
Again, this idea of most of the time, the females are shown in relation to a man. This is a single mom with teenage or older kids,
right?
Girls. So it was a very unique show.
Yeah. No.
Valerie Bertinelli and
Mackenzie Phillips, and Bonnie Franklin as the mom, and of course Pat Harrington, famously as Schneider, the building superintendent.
Yep.
And then this one's not unusual; it's just kind of your standard workplace comedy. But Taxi,
yes,
was very oddball, very unusual.
It was, yes.
It's one of those stories of kind of the straight character trying to hold the world together with all these oddballs. So, of course, famously launches the career of Andy Kaufman. It's a very out there.
People who became very famous, even if for only being character actors, came out of that show too. Tony Danza came out of there. Judd Hirsch, Christopher Lloyd. Oh, excellent actor.
Yeah.
Marilyn Henner.
Yeah. And of course Danny DeVito. On top of all of them, Danny DeVito's still out there. You're like, how does this guy still have acting jobs? He's 4'3", but there he is.
He's that brilliant. That's why
he's just got that comic knack, and just did a great job in Taxi.
Yeah.
If you've never seen Taxi, you should look it up. Again, almost everybody in the cast went on to huge, bigger and better things, and it's such an oddball, weird show.
It's one of the few ensemble, truly successful ensemble workplace. Because you've got Barney Miller.
I was going to say you got to mention.
That
Barney
was the
Miller
next
here.
one up. That was Barney Miller.
You've got the Mary Tyler Moore show with in the newsroom.
Yeah.
What was that? Wasn't the regular Mary Tyler Moore show? But what was the name of that one?
Are you talking about Lou Grant?
That was Mary Tyler Moore.
Was that Mary Tyler?
It
Okay.
was, yeah.
But
Okay.
it kind of focused on both. It focused on her home life a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Lou
then,
Grant is a drama that was.
It
later.
is. It was with the same,
the spin-off.
Same guy, but
exactly, and it was a complete change around.
Totally.
A great ensemble of mostly unknowns
at the time.
At the time, that was about a job that most people can't really relate to. This taxi company, and all the people are cab drivers. It's like, why would they be interesting? Another similar show, the workplace comedy, that's became very iconic, WKRP in Cincinnati.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Was it 3 seasons?
Yeah, only 3 or 4 seasons.
But it is. Oh my gosh!
But it's very memorable. Again, the episode about the
turkeys,
the Thanksgiving and the tornadoes.
Howard Hessman.
And
Howard Hessman. He was the other one.
Raise our glass on that one, and let's just say the word right now.
Booger.
That's right. Got to do it, man.
So,
got to do it.
WKRP in Cincinnati with the great characters, well written, mostly also unknowns at the time. And you mentioned Barney Miller. We've talked Barney Miller before.
Yeah, 8 seasons. This is
it was
successful
really
stuff.
good. It was a workplace comedy that was even more limited than like a Taxi, because I think the only set was the squad room.
Essentially, now
I think there were a couple of others.
The first season had Barney's apartment, which they quickly just moved away from that because Barbara Barry was his wife. Yeah. She just stopped. They just stopped appearing. She would occasionally guest, and they would have the occasional out somewhere. They went to Fish's house once. And occasionally they'd have a set somewhere. Yeah. But it's basically in front of a live audience.
Yeah. It is the almost the wet dream of the set decorator.
Yeah. Because it never changes.
You do it once and you're done.
Right. I mean, even Taxi was mostly at whatever you call it, at the garage.
The garage.
But they had bar scenes and they went WKRP would go to different houses or locations and the mall. But Barney Miller, most of the time,
this is
more so than the others.
This is kind of a play. It's a live performance.
Yeah, it's almost like a play.
And it was in front of a live audience,
one stage,
and it let these guys because they do this stuff in one take.
Yeah,
this is some good stuff.
They really riffed, and it was tremendous.
And you got some tremendous talent on that show: Abe Vigoda, Hal Linden. Jack Sue, God bless him. He's one of the. I mean, they actually.
Ron Glass was tremendous.
Ron Glass, and Steve Landisberg.
Steve Landisberg, yes,
that's right.
Yes,
Dietrich. I mean, we Ron Carey. All these folks. James Gregory.
James Gregory.
Can't say enough good things about that.
James Gregory had always been a dramatic actor. Serious. He had serious parts.
Well, he played General Ursus in Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
Which, ironically, I didn't see until I knew him as Inspector Luger. I'm having a hard time believing this guy as this badass super gorilla ape because I'm hearing Inspector Luger.
You hear all the goofy shit that used to come out of Inspector Luger.
That's I don't want now. Whatever,
So he was one of those guys with a great voice.
Oh, he was
like
fantastic.
a Strother Martin or something, who had that amazing voice that you always knew was him right at the moment. So I think there's more in the 70s. Mork and Mindy, important for launching. Robin Williams. Mm-hmm. And we didn't talk Get Smart. We didn't talk Beverly Hillbillies. We didn't talk Happy Days. Happy Days is iconic. We still talk Jump the Shark.
But you know what? That phrase still just annoys me. It happened in the middle of the show, not the end of the show. Darn it.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. But it's something that people remembered.
Well, but people say, the show was gone the next year. No, it wasn't. It went on for another 5 years.
Yeah, they were still number one, even in the ratings for a couple of years after that. But, I mean, you could also say it as an expression of the quality might have gone down.
Well, and that's it's the epitome of goofy, is doing the shark jump. And that's what I get. But it's people
which was not supposed to be the show. It was. I mean, there are other goofy shows that can get away with that. Well, this was not. It was changing what was supposed to be the show was about.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where it's set 20 years earlier than it airs, and yet it still does some of that socially conscious.
Yeah, it still had more of a 70s sensibility, even though it's set in the 50s.
Right. I mean, it's still very much. It's kind of true to the 50s. Yeah. It's like I think there's only ever one black character on there. And, granted, in 1950s Milwaukee, he may have been the only black guy in Milwaukee. But, and he made an appearance.
Yeah. But it also mutated from, it was supposed to be about Richie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then when Henry Winkler's Fonz caught on, then
it became a cultural phenomenon.
That's what they mutated it into always being about the Fonz, basically. But he was the one that was on the lunchboxes.
Right.
Not so much Richie.
Well,
Richie was in the background and Fonz was in...
He already had lunchboxes. We didn't need to have Ron Howard on lunchboxes. But, before we go any farther, real quick, because I know we're, 53 minutes into this. We said we'd be hard-pressed to keep it under an hour anyways.
I think we're going to have to let this one go to 1:15.
No question. But, one of the things I want to point out is that every decade is a reflection of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in the 50s, you have some very idealistic kind of stuff going on. Honeymooners is the exception to that.
Yeah.
I think what's groundbreaking about the Honeymooners is not so much that it's working class as it is that it's a little over the top. It's almost vaudevillian in that sense.
Yeah, because Ralph Kramner can't catch a break.
Right, he can't catch a break.
Yeah. He always loses.
Most of them are still very much an idealized form of family life in one way or another. And you could say that's kind of true about Ralph and Alice because they love each other no matter what.
The show often ends with them kissing.
Right.
Yeah, so it's...
So even though he pretends like he's going to beat the crap out of her, he never lays a hand on her.
To the moon, Alice. To the moon.
One of these days.
And one of those days never comes, But, when you get into the 60s, you have an element of fantasy. Because I think even when you talk about those rural comedies, there's an element of fantasy.
Absolutely.
Because it's not real world.
Oh, not at all.
In that same way.
Petticoat Junction is very much time out of mind.
Right. I mean, that's
that was their intention.
Right. Well, it also harkens to a simpler time.
Yes.
But, I mean, you've got I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, so you've got that element of the fantastical there. Yeah. And I don't just mean that outfit that Jeannie's wearing.
Yeah,
either.
I mean, even Mayberry is like... Well, they still picking up the phone and talking to the operator in person.
Right, right.
You get me Helen over at the diner.
Yeah, exactly. But there's that element of fantasy in the sense that aren't these wonderful times that they're living in.
Well, and those who were adults during that time now harken back because most of those are aging out.
Yeah.
They still say, why can't we have shows like that anymore? And I'm thinking there never were shows like that. There's shows like that, but the world was never like that.
But that's the thing, though. Your entertainment, it's okay for that.
Right.
But one of the reasons why those got canceled, as we've talked about, is that they didn't reflect the world. So when we start moving into the 70s, our comedy, our sitcoms are starting, just like the movies. We talked about how everything went from... cowboys and Indians and big budget epics and all that, to John Wayne doing a cop.
Yeah, to the French Connection.
And Dirty Harry.
And Dirty Harry. Very rooted in the real world. So are our sitcoms, and even the ones that are ensemble, like the cop show in Barney Miller. It's still rooted in real world. They talk about
it's rooted in the mundane.
Yeah,
in the trivial and the mundane.
Especially that. I mean, you could almost make the argument that Barney Miller is a precursor to Seinfeld. In that
there's a lot of truth to that because they're making something mundane
but I mean,
funny.
It's still set in the real world in the sense that when there's a blackout in 1978, it happens on the show.
Oh yeah, they celebrate the bicentennial in 76.
They celebrate the bicentennial.
Yeah. The energy crisis is often mentioned. It's very much where you are.
Things
High
are rooted,
and everything.
Everything is rooted in the real world. Whereas I think when you get to the 80s, and I know you're probably not quite there yet.
No, that is where I'm going next, is the 80s.
So when you get to the 80s, things are rooted in the real world, but often I think we've gotten rid of we're tired of having all the negative stuff of the 70s. The 70s sucked. As a decade, generally speaking, was not a great decade.
No.
And when you get to the 70s and you get things like now, granted, to the 80s, and granted, Three's Company is at the tail end of the 70s and into the 80s. Yeah. That's probably your first real romantic sitcom, relational sitcom. I can't think of anyone...
That doesn't involve people who are actually dating each other.
Right.
Or related to each other.
Yeah. Or related to each other, yeah. It's not workplace, and it's not family life.
Exactly. It's different.
It's the pseudo-family.
Right. It's friends before friends.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Yeah.
And it's more positive, not quite Pollyanna, but it's more about it's more positive outlook on things.
Yeah, it's more fun than most of the others.
Yeah, it's designed to be more fun. Yeah,
not necessarily funny. They're all funny.
Yeah,
but it's fun
and lighthearted. A
lighthearted,
a little more vaudeville, slapstick.
Yeah,
well, that kind of tradition.
And Taxi is not unlike that either.
Yeah,
when you get to Family Ties.
Yes. Oh, I forgot about Family Ties.
Family. I mean, how you forget about Family Ties?
I love how that later on would tie into Spin City, where when Michael J. Fox had to leave Spin City, he said he was moving to Washington to work for Alex P. Keaton.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
To work for Senator Keaton from Ohio.
Yeah. Nice.
So yes, all in the Family Ties I completely forgotten about, but it was really a big deal in the 80s.
It was.
It was
Alex Keaton was the guy.
Hugely popular. But the 80s, to me, again, we'll have to skip a ton of 70s ones that I love. Bob Newhart, Dukes of Hazzard. You have all these we have to go shoot past.
Well, Dukes of Hazzard isn't really a sitcom, though.
It's hour-long format. and it's on location outside most of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's not within a set.
Comedy, but it's not really sitcom. It's funny, but
it's an attempt at blurring that line.
Yeah, because there's a little bit of serious stuff occasionally.
Yeah,
but
it's
comedic, but not
it's a very different thing.
It's funny, but to me, the '80s are defined by the Cosby Show.
When it comes to situation comedy,
it was the number one show for a long time.
And Cosby, I think they go together.
Cosby is
because Cosby is the black version of Family Ties. Family Ties is the white version of Cosby.
So it's not just that it's a black family. It's taking that next step from the Jeffersons to not just a successful business, but here's a doctor and a lawyer, black doctor, black lawyer, live their family life.
Right.
And I mean, there was a time it really was. It was the number one. It was the phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah, it defines the '80s more than anything else.
So, and then again, quirky weirdness comes back with things like Night Court.
Yes.
It's very much a successor to Taxi.
Was a good show. It really
was. That was another workplace sitcom that was just one of the funniest things ever.
Oh, just a hoot all the way through.
Yeah. Some of that is just some phenomenal writing and just some phenomenal acting from all of them. Yeah. From Marky Post, from John Larroquette,
Richard Mall.
It's just so many good.
Yeah. When you get that great, wonderfully written characters put together with fantastic actors behind them.
Well, the chemistry between those guys.
That's right.
The chemistry between John Larroquette and Marky Post was great. And I don't just mean the romantic tension.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't even the first one.
No, she was the second one, I think.
Yeah, second or third one. So,
and yet she's the only one you remember.
Yeah.
Not just because she's beautiful, yes, but she and Dan Fielding played so well off of each other.
She recently passed away, too.
She did, yes.
That was much younger than she should have.
Yeah.
She really did a nice turn on Chicago PD.
Oh, did she?
From that, yeah.
Okay.
So, but Ellen Foley, I think, preceded her, right?
Sounds right. I don't remember the
name.
And
Ellen Foley, famous for singing with Meatloaf.
Oh.
See? It's everything connects.
Everything connects, yeah. Everything goes back to Rocky Horror somehow.
Yes, it does. It does. It all connects. Yeah.
But,
bless my soul. Hopatootie, bless my soul. It all connects.
Yep. In a way, the 80s, it's not the decade of the sitcom the way the 70s was.
Well, you have medical shows.
The cop shows and the medical shows
cops and the medical take over. That's when Hill Street Blues becomes a big phenomenon, and that starts it.
It's St. Elsewhere.
St. Elsewhere rings from that, and then you get NYPD Blue and a few other those dramas, hour-long dramas, become preeminent.
Come back,
yes. Yeah, and that's just what people wanted.
So other than the Thursday night shows, Cheers,
which we
we had Family Ties, we had Cheers, we had Cosby, and Night Court. I think those were the four that were back to back on NBC,
and they ruled. They ruled the night.
Yeah, must see TV is what they called it,
and that's where the phrase was brought about.
Yeah.
For that.
I mean, the NBC Thursday night owned television.
Yeah.
Really did.
It was,
and if I recall correctly, at 10 o'clock it was Hill Street Blues.
I think
I'm
you're
almost
correct.
Positive. Yeah,
something like that.
So Thursday was an NBC night.
So,
they ruled.
Yeah. So you move from that then to the tail end of the 80s and into the 90s, where there's another big sea change, because now there's a new player on the scene in Fox.
Yes.
And what gives
which they never thought would ever happen. They didn't think it was they thought it was dying.
Fourth networks of there's not enough viewers. But what gave them staying power and legitimacy was a little comedy called Married with Children, which also turned out to be like an 11-season, as long as MASH and Cheers and everything was on.
Yeah, it had legs like nothing else.
It was the opposite.
Like Kelly Bundy? Is that what you're about to say?
No, because Kelly wasn't known for her legs. She was known for something else.
Yes, that's right.
But it was that subversive moment where it takes Cosby and tumps it on his head.
Right.
Or it takes the Honeymooners and tumps it on his
head.
It had an edge that was very raw at times.
Well, the thing I always said about Married with Children, one of the reasons I liked it so much. Now, granted, I come from a somewhat dysfunctional family, more so than many, was that they had the courage to say out loud whatever they thought about their family.
Yes.
Well, in many respects, it's the '90s version of All in the Family, of that messed up version of folks.
But with less of a social message.
Well, that's correct. It's more comedic and it's more internal than it is external.
But Peg Bundy is a very unique sitcom character.
She is.
You were never supposed to. You could depict the husband as kind of a doofus.
Yeah.
But to depict the mom as lazy, layabout, money grubbing, you didn't do that. Yeah. Moms were the saviors of the families.
Right.
And here she's like she's just as useless as the husband is.
Yeah. And less useful because he actually goes out and works.
Yeah. So it was very radical. Mm-hmm. I mean, we wouldn't think anything of it now, but for 1990, it would still be
radical today because it's one of those things that almost none of the shows we've talked about could ever be made today, either because of the content. Because even All in the Family you couldn't make today.
Yeah.
Because even though it was socially conscious for the day, Archie Bunker is not a character that would ever be allowed on television. Al Bundy, with his very sexist approach to things, would never be allowed on television today. And I'm not saying that I bemoan the fact that there are no more Al Bundys. But I do in the sense that it was a raw form of comedy that that raw comedy is important.
Yeah.
Because in its own way it can make you think. In many ways it can make you appreciate the family you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that was, again, we moved from that to something like Roseanne.
Yes.
Very similar type of thing.
That blue collar, rawness, edge.
Roseanne was a female-led Honeymooners.
Yep.
In many ways.
It's much more akin to the Honeymooners than even Married with Children. The Simpsons.
I was going to say, you got to go to
The
Simpsons.
You got to talk about
because ultimately that's been the anchor upon which the Fox television network has subsisted.
Yes.
It's the consistency. I mean, Tracy Ullman's show was,
she was great.
She's fine
I loved that show. Yeah,
she did a fine job, but it didn't last. But the Simpsons took
variety shows are notoriously difficult to.
It's just not going to stick.
Yeah,
I mean, you get a year out of it. I think that's what they had. I don't remember if they had two.
SNL works only because of multiple. Well, there are several reasons. SNL works because you change the cast.
Yep.
And it's on at late nights, so you don't have to have a large audience.
Yep.
You don't have to have primetime numbers. And then you have to have enough people that just don't care that it's not any good anymore.
Yeah. I think of one like In Living Color.
Yeah.
Which was lightning in a bottle for Fox as well.
That's right. Yes, it was.
Started off Jim Carrey's career.
Yeah, so as a variety show. And so even that couldn't sustain as well as that was done. But again, Roseanne, Simpsons, Full House, Family Matters.
Yes.
And then, like I said, Big Bang to me is is the flip side of Family Matters, where Penny is Urkel.
Yeah.
She's the oddball, not Urkel. You then move to the 90s with Friends.
Yep.
Very groundbreaking.
Still holds up.
It's sort of a family show, but they're not family.
Right. It's not a workplace. It's sort of a romantic, but not entirely, because it goes back and forth.
Yeah, which was the freshness of it. That's one of the reasons. That plus the character.
Well, it was the snark.
That's true.
Chandler, to me, Chandler's the heart of the show. Not Ross and Rachel, not Monica. Chandler's the heart of that show. Yeah. Because of his snark.
Yeah.
The insecurities.
Yeah.
And the snark is like the odd mix of what a great character that is.
Yeah.
Designing Women.
Oh, yeah.
Another big time Golden Girls. Again, female led. They're the center, the show. Movie Murphy Brown, another important one.
Yeah,
where the
seen as subversive at the time.
Yeah,
it really was. It took that edge of feminism and really went hard with it at times. And I don't know to say it was always as funny as some other shows, but it was very well written. Though.
It was well written. I mean, Candice Bergman, she's a phenomenal actress.
Yeah.
And she, I watched the show. She was funny, and it was fun most of the time. But there were times when
it preached.
Well, I almost never like a show that preaches.
No, you're exactly right.
If I want to be preached at, I'll go sit in the pews.
Yes.
Or I'll listen to my own homilies. But, heck, I don't even listen to my homilies. But, usually when comedy tries to preach at you, they fail.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she failed, or that show failed when it did, just as most of them do. Because it's hard to be funny and preach at the same time.
That's why...
As any good preacher will tell you, it's hard to do both.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I think it died a premature death. It could have lasted longer had it been tooled a little differently.
It was kind of a thing where we've done this before, Candace. We listened to Alan Alda for 11 seasons. We're not going to listen to you for 11.
That's right.
Well, and maybe it's just the fact that it was female-led, it didn't play as well that way. Because, there are preconceived notions of how women should be on certain...
Yeah. But
at certain times.
It had all been done.
It had, yeah.
So she wasn't really breaking a ton of new ground.
Yeah, there's a freshness that must be present in every good, successful
There
company.
was an element to that. Because, I mean, Candace Bergman on a sitcom, that was pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Sybil Shepherd doing Moonlighting. That's not a sitcom that's close.
Well, I was going to say, you could make the argument.
You could make an argument for it, but it also is serious, too.
Yeah.
It's another one of those dramedies.
Yeah, and it was a romantic comedy.
And it was a romantic comedy, but the fact that Sybil Shepherd was doing a television show was a big deal because she's a big name. So was Candace Bergman.
And ironically, Sybil Shepherd is probably better known for Moonlighting because of the quality of that show than many of the things she did before that.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. She was in. I can't remember the name. It was.
Well, she was a favorite of Robert Altman, right?
Yeah.
She was in the Last Picture Show.
The Last Picture Show. That's
a big one.
And then in a related movie. But I mean, she was in movies and she was a big deal in the 70s.
But the same thing. Candace Bergen had been a film actress primarily.
Yeah, and that was back when film and TV actors and actresses really did.
It was hard to make the shift.
Yeah.
So to attract a Candace Bergen and get her to be on TV
wasn't Buddies. We didn't even mention that.
Yeah,
now, that's a groundbreaking show.
Well, that's you're correct.
Yeah. And that's in the 80s.
Yeah.
You got two guys dressing up as women to live in a hotel cheaply.
Yeah.
Every man's dream, except the dressing up as women.
Yeah. So moving from the 80s, again, we kind of hit the 90s already a little bit with Seinfeld, a show about nothing. So
which they were openly honest about it.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a rule, no growth.
That's right. But the writing was so solid.
Yeah.
But you know what? Not all the time. I thought Seinfeld could be funny, but I didn't think it was always funny. I thought, especially by the time we get to the end, all I could think of those guys were they're the biggest bunch of freaking losers I've ever seen on television. Yeah. Precisely because of the rule, there is no growth.
Yeah.
Well, we'll explore that in a Seinfeld episode.
Yes.
So I just want a couple more to talk about real quick before we finish up that I think are, again, maybe not the greatest shows, but were unusual and have a pretty devoted following. The Office.
Yes. It's very...
not one that I know a ton about, but I know this idea of the mockumentary, the documentary style that it's done in, where you're intermixing these character interviews done in character, is now something that has been carried forward to things like Parks and Rec and Modern Family. And then the other one is one of the few that I watch right now, Mom. It just ended.
Kathy...
Alice and Janie.
Alice and Janie, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's a show that's primarily focused on recovery of substance abusers. It's a Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre's had a heck of a track record, almost to the Norman Lear level, because 2.5 Men, Mike and Molly...
Northern Exposure. I think was his. So not even a sitcom, but I want to say that was his.
He's kind of like up there with Dick Wolf. Like if you turn on the television, you're probably either watching a Dick Wolf or a Chuck Lorre show. Big Bang is Chuck Lorre.
Yeah.
Bob Loves Abishola is a Chuck Lorre.
I've not seen that one yet. But again, I don't watch. Once you get into the 2000s, I'm really not watching nearly as much television.
But Mom is really good. Even though it's one that's they tinkered with and experimented. Originally, it was going to have more kids in it. The Anna Faris's character Christy, it included her kids. They kind of gradually wrote them out and made it more about the friendship group, the kind of the substitute family group, and the meetings. what is her? Jamie Presley is good.
My Name is Earl.
My Name is Earl.
Home Improvement. We didn't even mention
Oh,
that. How did we
wow!
forget
How
that
did we
one?
miss that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fantastic show.
And again, these performances of the actors. Again,
Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yes,
These are some really good stuff.
That was a very, very long-lived one. But I just, Mom, I think, deserves that mention because the subject matter is very unusual for a comedy. They're all, substance abuse, and it's very frank about what they've done and what they've been through, and the recovery process and the meetings. And again, the performance of Allison Janney and Jamie Presley are just boom. Right off the
the interesting thing about television right now. Well, first of all, regular television. It seems like there's almost nothing that's worth watching on any of the networks because half of the shows are some kind of reality or dance or singing show, and honestly, I have never cared for any of them, or a dating show like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette kind of BS.
Yeah, don't even get me started on my loathing for things like The Bachelor.
Yeah, Mrs. Robert will occasionally watch that stuff. Drives me nuts, but if that's what she wants to watch, then she's got her own television. She can do that. But I find that the best shows are on the streaming services.
Yeah.
Now, but the interesting thing is, there's not a whole lot of sitcoms.
That's
on
not
the
their
streaming
thing.
services.
They don't seem to.
Now, there's a little bit of that kind of stuff, but it's very, very rare. But still, though, the good quality writing, the serious writing, tends to be on those. So there's not been a whole lot of sitcoms that I've been watching, which is really funny. Funny, not funny, ha. Because sitcoms were my thing. That's what I watched the most of when I was younger.
And now they're a dying breed.
Dare we
say that?
No, there's just so many channels and so many things are on. There's probably plenty of sitcoms on. I just don't have the time to search them out.
Well, there's so much ground has already been plowed. There's
exactly.
What is there left to do?
Because we're talking
what
about
type of a hook can you get that has not already been done?
Right, because we're talking 70 years of television, give or take a little bit less, but we'll take 70 years, and especially when it comes to comedy, and with everything being available to be streamed or downloaded nowadays, everything that's ever been done practically is available.
Yeah.
So it's a lot harder to take comedy, I think, and repeat it simply because comedy is situational, more than it is character driven. Now you can have character because Big Bang is character driven comedy. That's rare, but again, that's lightning in a bottle. Just from my experience, now Barney. But it's probably the best of them are character driven. Frasier is character driven.
Yeah.
Barney Miller was character driven.
Very much so. Yeah.
But much of what of the comedy that's on there is more situational, or those particular characters in that situation. It's like you take those characters anywhere else, they don't work anywhere except in that. Which is probably true for most things, but it just seems like I don't know. It just seems like it's like you said, all that stuff's been done.
Yeah, it's so hard to make something that doesn't feel derivative
or contrived.
Yeah,
like that show about the guy who was I think a photographer, and he works with a bunch of millennials, and he has to come in from the field to keep his job, and so I forget how they're getting their images, downloading it from the internet or whatever. But the whole thing was, millennials and this guy clashing. This guy was only like 10 years older than them, so it's not like there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
He might have been the tail end of our generation, but I don't even think he was that.
Yeah.
I think he was probably like first of the real millennials, and he was dealing with the younger ones. Because the quote that I always remember from that show, and I don't even know what the show was anymore, because I never watched it, was this girl, she complains about, I've been on the job for 3 weeks and I haven't gotten a promotion yet. Like, oh yeah, that's a millennial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to my millennial children, I don't mean that to you guys, but that's the stereotype.
Well, when you look at this stuff, you start to research some of this and you try to refresh your memory on all the shows you loved, and then you realize that during the decade of the 80s, there were more than 240 sitcoms on at one time or another.
Wow.
Stuff that lasted 3 weeks or 6 weeks.
Well,
how do you have something original? Even sometimes the original stuff doesn't last.
Right.
Yeah, because
I remember there was one in the 70s. Again, this aired for like 3 months. And I think here it was preempted for basketball most of that time. But it stays with me, even though I was 12 years old. It's a show called Quark.
Oh my gosh, yes!
Absolutely.
With Richard Benjamin.
Yes, in space, in
Space
Garbage Men in Space.
Yes, Garbage Men in Space. It was Quark. And I'm like, this is so weird and different. I like it.
Yes, that was a great
and
show.
It's never coming back.
No.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's like even the oddball stuff, the fresh stuff, doesn't catch on.
How do we miss the Odd Couple?
It's on my list here. I had to run past it.
Yeah.
The Odd Couple. So Neil Simon was somebody that right there with
well, again, that was a play
creators.
and a movie.
Yeah. But it's churning out from him. So anyway, that was terrific. Again, listeners, episodes on things like Frasier, Seinfeld are coming up. We'll have to add Big Bang probably to the
Yeah, we definitely should do a Big Bang.
You're assigned to do that, Robert.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so that way you can get it all where you would want it. you can captain the Big Bang episode. All right. So at an hour and 20 minutes, I feel like I let y'all down that I didn't get this one going a little earlier. So
that's all right. Every month has got to have one extremely long episode, it seems.
Well,
it's usually not the pop culture.
Yeah, we haven't done that in a while. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's the big question. Francis, what's next time, buddy?
You know, we're going back. We're going medieval on your ass again. We're going to go back. It's kind of a second part, sort of, kind of, not really.
Oh, well, I mean, you can't do one without the other.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about the Knights Templar. We're going to go deeper into that. We did the one on the Crusades. We're going to talk a little bit deeper on the Knights Templar next time. It's got a great show called Nightfall, and lots of other things we can talk about. Don't miss it.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.